You're listening to One Free Family, a new take on peaceful parenting, where you can hear ideas for helping to raise free, independent, and peaceful children. Visit onefreefamily.com to connect and listen. Here are your hosts, James and Taylor Davis.
And we're back with another episode of One Free Family. This is James.
And Taylor.
And we are so excited to talk today about how we can disagree in a healthier fashion with our kids. But first, there's an exciting thing that happened for the show.
Do it.
Someone pledged at our executive producer level on Patreon, which is a $50 per month pledge. That was Chrissy. Thank you so much, Chrissy. When that email came through, I was completely stunned and floored that this podcast was so meaningful for you. And in case you've never been over to the One Free Family Patreon page, which you can find by going onefreefamily.com/support, there are some perks for that tier, which include a 30-minute chat with us about parenting stuff, if you'd like. And then if you stay at that level, there's a bunch of other cool perks too, like follow-up chats, even a One Free Family t-shirt. One has never been produced before, but will be awesome in 2 months if Chrissy stays on at that level. So anyway, thank you so much, Chrissy. It was just a total day maker to wake up and see that, and really inspiring for us to get cracking on this next episode.
Yeah, it really is. I think just the feedback that we get through sponsorship and also just through people sharing what we say and do and responding to it. It's just so exciting for us because it means that we're doing what we want to do, which is just reaching people and giving people new ideas to think about and hopefully helping people just live in a more connected way with their kids. So it's just really inspiring to us. Yeah.
Another little piece of show news, as it were, we plan on starting to bring some guests on the show.
We're going to do it.
Yeah, we're ready because thanks to Roger and the folks at Pax Libertas, they've set up a really convenient way for us to do this. We're not super technical when it comes to the audio side of all of this. So we just never really had the bandwidth to figure out how to do that. But now that he's set it all up, we plan on doing it. So if there's someone you really love who you think we should talk to,
let us know.
Yeah, please do let us know. You can hop in the One Free Family Facebook group. You can email us, James and Taylor at onefreefamily.com.
I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't use that email very often, but I think you can email us there too. Housekeeping over.
Done.
I've made a declaration.
Yeah, you did a good job. You didn't elaborate too much. You didn't go into too many stories. That was good.
You gave me plenty of warnings. But see, no one's even going to understand that because you always make me re-record. Because the joke here is that sometimes
James gets a little wordy on the housekeeping and the intros.
Well, especially when we have a patron, I feel so grateful. And it comes from such a good place
again.
Of me wanting to say, so I'd say oh yeah, my friend Jim just supported the show.
He wants to give a whole biography on the person.
He's someone I met in high school, whatever. And yes, I do want to give a biography because they're important people in my life. So thank you, Chrissy.
Well, we don't even know you, Chrissy, so that's really awesome. So thank you so much.
I didn't give a biography about
Hopefully
you.
we'll know you soon.
Know that it was in my heart. Anyways, we're talking about trying to disagree in a healthier way. This was also inspired by that very same excellent One Free Family Facebook group. Someone brought in a story specifically about disagreements in their house around bathing time. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But I think this spurred a bigger picture thing, which is that, as families, we're going to be living all together as independent people, especially strong-willed people like we have in our family. It's just inevitable that people are going to have different opinions about things sometimes. And sometimes they're going to have really, really strong different opinions about things. And navigating those discussions can be really hard.
Yeah, I think that I just wanted to start out by kind of helping us to reframe disagreement in a way that we can, like James, like you said, understand that it's hard and it's challenging, but also kind of readjust our expectation to one that says disagreement is going to happen in my family. It might happen daily. And that does not mean that things are going wrong in my family necessarily. Disagreement is really healthy and normal, especially like you're saying, James, in families where we're working really hard to honor our kids as independent, autonomous individuals. There may actually at times feel like there's more disagreement because our kids feel safe disagreeing with us. And our kids, we've hopefully been working really hard to preserve our kids' ability to voice their opinions and to preserve the idea for them that they can have opinions that differ from us and that their opinions matter. So I sometimes say gosh, this type of parenting can feel like a lot of work because we're having so many conversations about every decision. But in the end, I think it's so worth it because I feel like when you ask parents, any type of parents, what they want for their kids when they grow up, I feel like, and maybe I could substantiate this by doing a little bit of research, but I feel like a very common response, one of the things people want is for their kids to be like unique, independent thinking adults, right? They want them to be independent thinkers. But we can't raise independent thinkers if we shy away from disagreement and try to get our kids to just do what we want them to do all the time.
It's a lot harder to anyway. Some kids are just going to
Some will, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them that will break. So I think that basically just kind of trying to embrace disagreement in our family as inevitable at times. And also what helps me sometimes is to also remember that disagreements are totally an opportunity for growth and learning. Like, I think we can learn a lot about our kids when we disagree and about what is important to them. And our kids get to learn a lot about how we handle disagreements. Like, the healthier we become in how we handle disagreements as parents, the more our kids are learning about healthy ways to handle their own disagreements as they grow and have new relationships. And we're not going to get it right every time, and we're not going to be perfect. And we can also just say to our kids, like, oh, I really didn't handle that the way I wanted to. I'm really sorry. This is what I wish I had done. So I think just embracing disagreement as normal and healthy and expected can be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah. And again, I think it is just such an opportunity, because I think while disagreements, being disagreeable, for instance, has an extremely negative connotation.
Yeah, good point.
Just people who offer disagreement a lot are sometimes seen as whiners, sometimes seen as, people that just want to start trouble. And I actually think it's usually the opposite. As I think about the people that I've worked closely with, that I've spent a lot of time with, it's impossible to avoid disagreement for all time. And usually the time to disagree, it's always better for me if someone will disagree with me right away than to let it stew and then come to me with a list of disagreements. To
kind of like go along, and then come to you and be like, look at all these things that you've done that have made me upset.
Or explode because now they're so frustrated.
Totally.
And so actually disagreement, another way to think of it is self-advocacy in many ways. It's stating honestly your needs, attempting to get your needs met. It's giving the other person an opportunity to meet your needs. And not to say that everyone who disagrees with you should get their way, but it's an opportunity to learn more. Like if we're disagreeing about
that's how I
some
see it,
simple fact, right? Like, so I say, oh, the earth revolves around the sun. And you say the sun revolves around the earth. And then we can actually, one of us can learn that we weren't right about that. We had that conversation just 2 days ago. When
that's so funny. We did not. We really didn't. I feel like people are going to think that happened.
No, you're not a flat or a, what is it called? Earth centrist?
I don't know. But I think it also, when you talk about it, gives us an opportunity to learn more. Like, it really, if we're open to our kids' differing opinions, it gives us an opportunity to learn about them and what fulfills them and how they operate and kind of how they engage with the world. And that just helps us to be better partners to them. And and I think it gives them, like, if we do this consistently, I think if they see that we are open to them, I think it gives them an opportunity to be more open to us. Right. And then they can also learn more about us.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. So I think step one, rethinking disagreement. It has to be step one. If every time someone disagrees with you, that's a trigger point for you.
Yeah.
You're going to be in for a tough time parenting and just probably being in relationships in general.
Yeah. And I think didn't we do an episode on what to do when we're triggered? I think we did. And we can look back and put in the show notes which episode number that was. Cause if disagreement in general is super triggering to you, you're not alone, and maybe go back and check that one out to get some tools and ideas for kind of moving through that as a trigger.
Yep. Right on. So that being said, I do think that there are ways we can set our families up for success to have fewer, not meaningless disagreements, because that invalidates people's strong feelings about this, but fewer routine disagreements about the same things.
So you mean setting us up to kind of have a family culture in place that's working pretty well for everybody in general? Well,
just, that's conducive to people feeling like they need to disagree less. Yeah. A good example of this in our family, and I think you've talked about this on the show before, is that leaving first thing in the morning tends to not align with the goals of our kids.
You mean like getting up and getting out the door to go do something early in the morning?
Right, exactly. So, when someone says 9:30 at the playground, who's in?
Oh yeah, our kids are like, wah, wah.
Well, right. And they might literally say that. That's been the thing.
They have been saying that lately. That's probably why I said
from them. That's nice job, buddy. But if we go into the day and first thing when they wake up, they come down the stairs and we say, hey, get dressed, because in a half an hour, we're going to go out and meet some friends at the playground. that is signing up for a disagreement in our family. And if we really think about our reasons for wanting to go to the playground, probably to get them, some fun social interaction with some friends, to get outside, get some fresh air, whatever. And then we weigh that against having an almost inevitable, I would say, at least discomfort in the house if they're not in the mood for a full-blown argument. When also there's probably going to be an opportunity, like if someone says, hey, do you want to meet us at the playground at 9:30? We have the opportunity to at least respond and say, what about noon?
Yeah.
Like our kids have some stuff they want to get up to this morning, but we would love to come meet you guys.
Yeah, and we also have the opportunity to just plan even further ahead,
Right. Well, and normally we do, because that's incidentally another one in our family, which is when our kids know the plan a day in advance. Yeah. There's almost never any disagreement these days around, going forth on almost any plan. Even like going to the doctor's office is often met with very minimal disagreement at this point. And it wasn't always that way. And I think that now that they understand that we're trying to be considerate of their desire to know the schedule a day in advance, that has actually eased.
And that's actually a good point. Like we just had our yearly physicals for the 2 older boys, and I intentionally scheduled them for 1 in the afternoon because I knew that day would come. Yep. And if they had to get up and out of the house at 9:30 in the morning, especially for like a doctor's appointment, it would just be awful for everybody.
Yeah, and it would set a tone for the day.
Yeah, so I think, along the, what you're saying, James, is so true. Like if we can really try to tune into our kids and get to know kind of what what flow works best for them. Mm-hmm. And if we can also, check in with our own needs and see if we're able to live with that. Because for a long time, I thought like, this is what responsible homeschooling parents do. Like our kids get up and we get out the house and we do something. And there's all these really great activities available for kids at like 10 in the morning. And I thought that that's what I had to do. And I kept trying and we kept fighting about it. And the kids were not happy with it. And so when I was finally able to like shut out that noise and realize that that's just what some people do. And if that works for their family, that's great. But I know I have learned that my kids really love to have the morning, to take it slow, to do all of their favorite things at home. And then many days they're like ready to go by lunchtime or after. When I could accept that and like start planning our lives that way, it really cut back on a lot of tension.
Exactly. And I think that's like the broader theme here is just recognizing the recurring disagreements in your home and trying to really get to the heart of why that's happening. Because usually recurring disagreements come from one side or both feeling like some strong need isn't being met. Yeah. So in this case, you have a need to get out of the house with some frequency, right? Probably a stronger need than our kids in some cases. Or at least like that's how you would verbalize it. They have a need to, especially in the mornings, feel like they can get started and feel like they're in control of their day. And so those two needs can be opposing if you want to compete over the same time of the day.
Right, but they don't have to be.
Exactly.
And that's where I think creative out of the box thinking. I mean, my solution here wasn't super creative. It was really me just like realizing what was happening and adjusting. Sure. But I will say in other situations, if you can just kind of, I think if we as parents can kind of question what we think has to happen and decide like, does it really have to happen exactly this way? A lot of times we might realize like, no, actually it doesn't. And that then opens the door for like us to collaborate with our kids and ask our kids like, well, you have this need and I have this need or desire. How can we work together to do the best we can for both of us? Right. And then all of these ideas can spring from there.
Yeah, because I think also when it comes to our relationships in general, being on the same page as someone means probably working to find a consensus or mutual space that you can both inhabit as frequently as possible. And I think that actually, when disagreements do arise, then both parties can be a lot more comfortable that they are in good faith.
Because there's a general feeling of like partnership and collaboration and like a general trust that we're doing our best to get everybody's needs met in the best way possible.
Right. Because on the flip side, I think a lot of relationships that can become really tense, whether it's from parent to child or teacher to student or between, partners, romantic partners or whatever else, is when one side simply feels like the other side wants to control them. Yeah. And if we're honest, I think a lot of the disagreements between adults and kids comes from the adult attempting to impose some level of control on the child.
Absolutely.
And like we'll talk about, as this episode goes on, sometimes that probably is necessary. Like children don't have all the context in the world. It's not to say that we can't help them to understand that sometimes they're not going to be able to get their way and do that in a compassionate manner. But if we're doing that with not just the fact that you have to brush your teeth or whatever your thing that you feel like is mandatory is, if we're doing it for when you have to brush your teeth, but also, when you have to take a bath at every time of the day, and also when you have to wake up and get out in the morning, and also, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
Also get really, really long.
The more control we try to exert over them, I think the more that, the more urgent it feels to them to grasp for freedom. And there's that's where I think like that feeling of collaboration and partnership really kind of withers away. Like you don't have that anymore. And then it's really, really hard to have productive conversations with our kids about how to meet everybody's needs. Yeah. And I think we have to be especially careful with our kids, like you said, because there just is, as hard as we try to be partners as parents, we are parents and they are kids, right? We are just like big grown-ups and they are small children, and there is a power dynamic there no matter how much we try to give them the space to be themselves. So I think we have to be especially careful there. Yeah,
absolutely. So sometimes though, we have created a dynamic in our family where there's some hot button issue, right? Something that we find ourselves arguing with our kids about, it seems like daily.
Yeah.
This was what the initial thread that sparked this show idea came from, where for them it was around bathing, and it was like every time the idea of bathing comes up, we're in this shouting match, was essentially how it came down. This type of thing has happened in our family before as well. And I will say that this is one of the very hardest things about parenting, especially parenting kids that are home as often as they want to be.
Yeah.
Like we are. How do we handle that when that comes up? Because like sometimes the situation just starts to feel so toxic that that even mentioning the word bath comes up and it's just like a nuclear arms race in the house. So how do we unwind that tension once it's come up?
I don't think there's any one answer to that because every family is different, but I do have some thoughts on it. And I'll use the bath example to start, but I also, after that, want to talk about an example from our family. But I think, so something like bathing, I think, and this is a general discussion about this now. It's not particularly in response to the question that was posted to that one family. But I think the first thing we need to do is evaluate what we are asking our kids in terms of how often they need to bathe, right? Like, so first step is like checking in with ourselves. Is our expectation or the thing we want to have happen, is it actually necessary? Because I think, so bathing, for example, for most people, for most kids, it doesn't need to happen every day. It doesn't need to happen every other day, even.
For health reasons.
Right. And so just being able to like have some flexible thinking around how often we think it needs to happen. Because I think maybe for many families, like when their kids are like babies and toddlers, there's a daily bath time ritual. And I think for many families, that's just like part of the bedtime routine. The toddlers love it. And so it works. And then I think sometimes we hold on to that as kids get older. And really, like, at a certain point, some kids are just not going to want to do that every day. And it's really probably not necessary. So I would say reevaluating, like, how often we think it's necessary. Obviously, like, health and wellness issues aside, like, if there is a real health need for some reason, then that's a different story. And then I would also say, once we've kind of decided how we feel about how often it needs to happen, like, I would agree that bathing needs to happen sometimes. So in that case, how can we then think creatively about ways to make it fun for our kid, right? So there were some great suggestions.
So why are you thinking about ways to make it fun? Like, what goal does that accomplish in terms of like the bathing thing? Is that too obvious of a question?
I don't know what you're asking.
Well, what I'm asking is like, so maybe this is just too obvious of a direction, but I just want to make sure that people get the assumptions there. Like, so you're saying we want our kids to bathe more frequently instead of continuing to give them science facts about why they bathe more frequently. You're saying just try to come up with fun ways to do baths.
Yeah, just take away the heaviness around it, right? Just like try to pivot from, you have to take your bath tonight, it's really important to bathe. And I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but if it's become that struggle, just try to pivot and think creatively about ways to make it happen that feel more fun for everybody. Whether it's, I was thinking like, if it's really hot where you live, like grab a bar of soap and go outside with a sprinkler and a hose, right? Or if If your kid, there's so many different ways. Like I mentioned before in our group that my kids sometimes really love having like a fun little snack on a plate on the side of the bathtub while they're bathing. They think it's silly to have a snack in the bath and it makes it fun. Sometimes we've done like bath crayons or bath paints or turn off the lights and glow sticks in the bath. Like there's all different things that requires a little more work and thinking on our part, but it makes it fun for the kids and it accomplishes the goal of them getting clean every so often. Some people might argue that that's like manipulative or trying to, you're still trying to get your need met. I think if your kid is old enough to understand, like you're not tricking them if you're just having a conversation and saying like, hey, I think this would be a fun way to get this done, and they're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think I am too. And also like if the goal really is to get the kid clean, it doesn't, and that's where we try to examine what our goals really are. Because I think sometimes the goal for the parent becomes, I just need this kid to say yes to taking the bath.
Totally.
Versus like you could go in the opposite direction. You could do body painting with your kids and then hose downs afterwards outside. And you wouldn't want to do that every single day. But that would accomplish the same goal of like getting water and soap on their body, if that really is at the heart of what you want.
Exactly.
And understanding that, again, most people in time recognize and desire to be clean from time to time, right?
But I will say that if you've been in constant disagreement about it, then it's going to create more and more resistance for your kid.
Well, exactly.
So that takes me to the third kind of idea
Sure.
that I have, which is if there is this hot button issue in your house, I would also consider like, is it something that you can just completely stop talking about for a couple weeks and just let it go? Again, always with a caveat of health and wellness and safety being front and center about whatever that means for you and your family. And I do challenge people to like really question if it's a safety issue or not. But if it's not, like for the bathing thing, like, can you just let it go for 2 weeks and just see what happens? Like, because I really think that when it's become this hot button issue in a home, the kids are like asking them more and more obviously is causing disagreement and tension. It's not making them want to bathe. So what if you just stop talking about it for 2 weeks and then like gently treaded back in afterwards?
Yeah, like almost when they've forgotten that.
Yeah, I think you just like have to let the tension diffuse in order for them to maybe be more open again. And, no promises that that's going to be the solution, but I think it's worth a try.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's like healing a joint that you've strained. It's like when that thing is hurt, if you just keep trying to use it every single day, it doesn't get better. And when it comes to those really strained parts in our relationships with our kids, if you let it heal for a little while and come back to it, I feel like people can revisit it with sort of a fresh mentality.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a situation in our family that has been ongoing for me, and I'm not doing exactly what I would like to do yet. I've gone through cycles with it, I think, but it's similar to the bath one. But for me and one of my kids, it's been about food. And food has been tough for me when it comes to trying to give our kids space to make their own choices, because I think everyone or many people can relate. I just really care about them, being healthy and living long lives. And
it's a huge value of yours too. You try to eat really intentionally.
Yeah. Well. And exactly. So one of our kids especially, and it's because of me doing this, is very averse to me really saying anything to him about food, about what he's eating. And even a simple statement, breakfast is on the table, even a simple statement of, are you going to eat those eggs? Is so loaded at this point for him that I said that last week, and it really, really upset him, and it created a whole cascade of upset and an argument, and it was really sad. And I realized that even though I didn't know in the moment what I was doing, that language was so loaded for him. That was saying to him, I want you to eat those eggs. I'm going to be disappointed if you don't. Yeah. And that is what I meant. Like, I did want him to eat them because he had eaten a bunch of fruit, which is fine, but I was concerned about him getting enough protein and getting his day started on the right foot so he would have energy for all his activities. So I think, but what I have found is when I've noticed this happening with me and him and food, and when I've been able, and James sometimes reminds me, to completely back off the food conversation for a week or two at a time, it really does start to heal. And I mean, I still need to work on not going back into that cycle because I keep falling off the wagon there. But I have found that that's really, really helpful. And over time, if I can stay away from talking to him about food, he'll start choosing a wider variety of foods more happily, asking for different things. It will be more enjoyable. So I definitely recommend considering, if there's a hot button issue, if you can, just drop it for a little while. I really think I've seen in my own life that it can help to diffuse the tension a lot.
100%. And I think when it comes to food, it's another example of a thing that actually, as a parent, you do have a lot of control over. Now, you may not have as much even as you want sometimes. Like, some person might offer your kid a bag of Skittles when you just didn't feel like them eating candy one day. And I think that actually, the bag of candy example came up in our group recently too. And ultimately, if you're doing the purchasing decisions in your home, you can buy the foods that you're comfortable with your kid eating. And while that's not like going to further probably their decision-making process around eating healthier food in the future, if that's a goal that you have, that will solve the immediate, like, because I think where food gets triggering for people, and I've observed with you too, is that you're like, am I just not giving them the building blocks to grow their body and mind in a healthy way? And that feels really important.
Yeah, it feels scary, right? There are these small people who are growing so fast and their brains are forming new connections all the time, and you want them to have the fuel they need. But again, I don't think making any decision out of fear is the best idea anyway. Right. And if I'm trying to really, really exert a ton of control over my kids' food choices because I'm afraid, I don't think that it's the best idea, basically. So, and the more I back off, again, like I said, the more I see him willing to kind of eat a wider variety of things. Yeah.
And that reminds me, there was this camp I worked with ages ago called Camp Augusta, and their director, Dr. Randall Grayson, created a website called cleancommunicate.org. And a lot of this isn't like totally relevant to parenting related stuff. But one thing I liked there was the idea that giving people unasked for advice is always going to create a weird power dynamic between them. You know, it's
Peter Gray has an article about that too.
Oh, that's
unsolicited advice.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to trying to avoid what I would deem sort of unnecessary or unproductive disagreements with our kids, we can understand that feeling of someone just showing up and being like, hey, you look like you need some advice, you know?
Eat those eggs, man.
Yeah. And again, if you decide, like we talked about earlier in the episode, that there are things that just feel mandatory to you and your family, there are ways you can handle that in a way that will facilitate smoother interactions in the future. And you have to understand that each time you exercise that sort of nuclear option of you're going to do this because you absolutely must, that is going to be very hard for the kid to understand. And again, sometimes it's going to feel necessary. Like our toddler, for instance, like sometimes he just wants to do something that is demonstrably dangerous, jump off the counter. You can't
like
do it.
He's just maybe going to land himself in the ER, and I don't want to do that.
And so no matter how much you argue and how upset you get, there's no way you're going to persuade me to make this extremely dangerous.
But here, let's go over to the couch. You can jump off the couch.
Exactly.
And,
right. But so anyway, but if we put that aside, you know, set those examples aside, the other ones, and I think the loaded language thing is a way that parents kind of wind up sneakily doing this sometimes without even, because they can tell themselves, well, I didn't even tell him he had to eat his eggs. Why is he so mad? Like, and that you can see how that conversation goes. And you didn't do this. You actually, to your credit, backed off right away. But when someone comes in and says, are you going to eat those eggs? You know, you could have the translator, the parent translator say, you should eat those eggs or we're probably going to have a disagreement about it. So then the kid understandably gets pretty upset, but I don't like eggs or whatever they say. And then
he just point blank told me that it's really annoying when I talk to him about what he's going to eat or what he's not going to eat. Did. Good for him.
Right. But so even in the hypothetical, I don't even like eggs. And the parent might say something like, you liked eggs last week. Yeah. And now we're in like a really weird, like if you came up to me.
Well, that's what I was going to say next.
Hey, I just made eggs. And be like, ooh, I'm not in the mood for eggs. And you told me you liked them last week.
Yeah, I would never do that.
What are you talking about?
Right. Why are you saying that to me? Well, I know in the aftermath of that situation with my son last week, I realized too, I was like, gosh, I never would ask James, like, hey, are you going to eat those eggs on your plate? Like, I would never do that
if you asked me,
another grown-up. So I really don't want to be doing that to him. I'd maybe be asking you because I wanted them.
Exactly. that I think, demonstrates the difference between communicating with kids and grown-ups.
Totally.
And so it's almost like this, and then the kid winds up feeling trapped because they're like, because then the grown-up might say, well, I didn't tell you had to eat them. And the kid can kind of think, but you sort of implied it, right? But now the kid kind of feels stupid, like, well, okay, technically you didn't tell me I had to eat them.
Right.
But what were you going to say if I said, no, I'm not going to eat them?
Or, worst of all, maybe the kid was going to eat them. And then you say, like me saying that and trying to have control over what he put into his body, he dug in and decided, well, I'm not eating these now. And I don't blame him. Like, he was resisting that control over him.
Exactly. And so I think, as we try to communicate more cleanly with our kids and disagree in healthy ways, we can avoid the unhealthy kind of power struggle related disagreements by trying to, as plainly as possible, say what we mean. So if you really are feeling that day, like that's just a conversation that has to be had. Hey, you haven't had any protein today. It's 6:30 at night. I'm seeing that you're feeling low energy right now. Can we help you get some protein related foods? So it's not just here's some eggs. Maybe it's peanuts. Maybe it's eggs. Maybe it's, spinach or whatever a burger, whatever the food might wind up being. That's a
much healthier way.
Right. Or likewise, a really common one, I think, see this with our kids, neighbors' kids, friends of ours, the idea of how kids spend their time. This is another one. So the parent who tells himself the story that they let their kids do what they want, generally speaking, or that they don't try to micromanage their kids. Maybe they don't have a technical rule around, say, how much watching YouTube they do in a given day, but they might come up and say, I don't know how you can watch that all day.
Yeah.
That is starting a disagreement, because the kid might say, well, you just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's loaded with judgment.
Right. The parents say, whoa. Hey, now, I wasn't trying to judge you. Or, oh, you finally emerged from the video game room.
I've never said that.
That was a total hypothetical.
Liked your voice on that one.
Yeah, well, I was trying to make it seem like not you. That's why I did a voice like that. Because I can do, most listeners don't realize, some do, but I can do a perfect impression of you.
It's uncanny.
Maybe that just for our patrons.
Yeah, we'll save that.
Yeah, but it actually is pretty insane. But yeah, so getting rid of the loaded language, I think, is going to go a long way to, approaching disagreements from a place of generosity and helping your kids understand that you are just earnestly trying to connect with them on some issue. And then you have a desire to feel heard rather than a desire to get your way any means necessary, even if it means being passive aggressive or,
and we need to, right. And they're not going to hear us if we're not practicing hearing them. So,
right.
I think there was one other thing I was going to say about the food thing. Oh, what you were saying about having a conversation. I noticed you haven't had any protein today and you seem kind of tired at 6:30. That sort of healthy communication, that sort of conversation is great. And it will be much better received if that's how you consistently interact with your kid. And if you're having that conversation right in the middle of food being a really hot button issue, don't be discouraged if the first time you try that, there's still a strong reaction from your kid, because if food is already a tense issue,
right,
they're still going to be in the habit of kind of becoming very defensive right away. So keep at it, or maybe try to take that little break. And then when you start talking about food again, try that. But don't be discouraged if you're in the middle of this hot button issue with food and you try something like that, if it doesn't feel awesome the first time.
Right. Well, because your kid probably will assume that an offer wasn't really an offer, that it was like the foreplay to another demand.
Right. So these things take time and consistency. And again, maybe a break from the tense issue might be what's really in order first.
Yeah. So, hey, at 6:30, you haven't had any protein today. And the kid says, I don't want that. I want spaghetti. You say, okay, all good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just move on from it.
Or maybe, again, if you're trying to take a break, you don't even say at 6:30 you haven't had any protein today. And you just tell yourself, this isn't forever, right? Because if you really are concerned about your kid's health, that can feel hard and scary. But you can just remind yourself, like, I'm trying this for a week. I'm trying this for a week, that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. So I'm going to give one or two more things that we want to try and avoid, and then go into a little bit of time on some things we want to focus on.
Let's do it.
Things we can actually do to improve. So, and these are going to be a little bit shorter examples, hopefully, because we still want to get to the good stuff as well. Sometimes in all of our communications, there's going to be times where, and especially kids, understandably, they're still figuring out how the world works. They're not always going to make the perfect point in attempting to get their needs met. So they might initiate a disagreement. This happened this morning, where I had a friend over last night and one of our kids was having a great time playing with him on the Xbox, right? So this morning, this is just one of the neighborhood kids. This morning, that kid wanted to get right back to it. Like, can we play on the Xbox?
And so did our kid.
Right. And that was cool, except then he realized that someone who's visiting us right now was using the Xbox at the time. And he started to feel concerned. And he's like, oh, well, if my friend comes over and we're not able to use the Xbox.
We want to get back to this Minecraft world.
It's really, really excited. And we pointed out, okay, well, someone's using it right now. So, it might not be able to happen this moment if that person comes over. And he said, but we were having so much fun with it last night.
And he said, but we had a plan to play today.
Oh, that's right. But we had a plan to play today. And it's like, at that point, what is the kid trying to communicate?
Just that he really wants to get back to this thing with his friends. So maybe you could share how I responded and how you responded as a good illustration.
I wasn't going to try.
I'm okay. No, okay. I think you should.
Well, so I think you said, well, you guys didn't make a plan for a specific time. And that invited further disagreement from him, or to feel like a fear, I think, that his needs weren't going to get met.
He was kind of feeling shut down or not heard.
Well, yeah, and again, like, because what would be the purpose of disagreeing with that statement? It would be in order to tell him he's not going to get what he wants, right?
Right.
And so
really,
I started to...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead with your intentions.
Well, yeah, my in responding that way, where I was trying to head with it was like, you guys didn't agree on a specific time, so it just might have to happen a little bit later.
Right.
But what James helped me to see is when I said that, all he could hear was basically, or all he could think was basically like, Mom isn't hearing how important this is to me, and she's basically trying to tell me I can't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not what I was trying to do, but I totally get why that response made him feel that way.
Right. So instead, trying something like, oh, well, we had a plan to play this morning. Okay, so you guys were having so much fun that you made a plan to play this morning. That technique is called reflecting, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally almost repeating back exactly what the kid said to let them know that you heard the parts that felt important to them, that you weren't just going to try and talk past them and make your point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in our minds, we understand that that's not really a very precise way to decide who gets to use the Xbox. Like, I can't just say, like, I made a plan with the neighbor to play Xbox 24/7 for the next 7 days so no one else can use it, right? We get that. But with him, the point now isn't to try to let him know that that's not a fair way to determine.
Yeah, we don't need to teach a lesson about that right now.
It doesn't matter for right now.
Right.
He's not trying to say that should be the decision-making rubric for all time. What he's trying to say is we wanted to play.
He's just trying to get his needs met in the best way he can.
Let him know, I hear that. You guys had a plan to play, and someone else is playing right now. So is there a specific time that we want to set where we can try and then we can communicate with the person who's playing so that everyone can feel like they've had a turn.
Yeah.
Just easy. And it lets him know that he's heard. It lets him know that my goal here is not to deny him his thing. And this is important, I think. My goal is not to stop you from getting what you want. It's to make sure we have a fair outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And
that includes helping you get what you want.
And if I do that, and if I can try and consistently approach things that way with him, he can trust that that's my goal. Now, a fair outcome might not always feel like his first choice.
Mm-hmm.
But if he trusts that is my number one goal, because if I start with disagreement, it's going to feel like my number one goal is actually to stop him from getting what he wants.
Yeah, totally.
Now, very reasonably, he shouldn't assume that probably, right? But that can still...
But it doesn't really matter in the moment.
Exactly.
Like me responding the way I did doesn't take the conversation where it needs to go. It doesn't help him learn any sort of lesson because he's just hearing basically that I'm not trying to help him. Like it just isn't effective.
Yeah, and I think the reflecting tool, the trying to restate your child's desires back to them, not only does it help them to feel heard, it allows for them to clarify if you actually weren't right. So
right, totally.
He says, well, I made a plan to play with him this morning. And I could say, oh, so it sounds like you guys were really looking forward to playing this morning. And now you're concerned that you're not going to be able to. They might just say, no, actually, that's not exactly what I'm concerned about. It's actually that, and then they might insert some other unforeseeable concern that they had that was under the surface. But if I make it about trying to point out that he's wrong, or trying to let him know that, or even assume what he's trying to say, like saying something like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to play this morning.
Yeah.
Even though that's true.
But that's not what needs to be said in the moment, right?
That's,
it's
again,
just not
helpful.
helpful.
The point.
Yeah.
And it's making assumptions. There's a lot going on there that isn't modeling good communication techniques for him.
Right.
And it's also going to put him in a place where he's going to feel like he's going to need to advocate more strongly for what he wants, or to just give up.
Right. Or when I'm trying to let him know something that feels important to me, by responding to him the way that I did, if I do that consistently, he's just going to respond to me the same way when I'm trying to share something that's important to me. And that's obviously going to feel really bad for me. And that not teaching, like you said, that's just not teaching him very effective communication skills.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that goal of modeling, it's underrated because most another reason a lot of parents and kids get upset with each other is when the kid treats the parent like the parent treats the kid.
Totally.
Because think about how many times you can see a parent getting short with a kid or rolling their eyes or sighing when asked to do something. And that is not like an organic behavior. That's typically a learned behavior. And like, I know I'm still struggling with this when I'm trying to talk to Gus, our 2-year-old, and I ask him for something and he sighs at me. Like, and I'm like, oh, right. That you're doing that because people have taught you that sometimes when you're asked for things, you sigh first and then you do it.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even get the context. He's not even trying to communicate that he's frustrated. And that's what kind of makes it just only cute and not infuriating.
Yeah, it's a lot cuter when he does it than when I do it.
yeah, I'll agree with that. So the modeling thing, and understand that your kids are going to ultimately learn from you first and foremost, or the adults in their life, how to handle disputes like that. And I think that's also where it's, maybe someday we can go even deeper into what our exact communication philosophy is, because it's not exactly nonviolent communication. It's not exactly, like I talked about, clean communication from this other website. It's kind of a hybrid of a bunch of these, but there are a few things that I work really intentionally to try and not say or do, because I want to make our disagreements healthier around the house. So just a few quick examples of these: getting rid of the language "you make me." Like, this is oftentimes language that you'll hear people employ that can feel really combative when you hear that from someone. You make me this and this and this. Because obviously it's, first of all, demonstrably untrue unless I'm physically...
What do you mean you make me?
So,
Can you give an example?
Yeah. You make me... You made me so mad when this and this happened. So that's a way you're taking agency away from yourself when you communicate that. You're saying that the other person essentially forced you. It was out of your control to feel mad because the person made you mad, versus communicating a similar idea, but owning your own emotions and reactions. So I feel mad when you pee on the floor and then refuse to clean it up or whatever, right? Again, totally hypothetical example.
Never happened in our house.
In our family. But like, just owning your own, it's naming a feeling is the idea, the way I've heard this described. It's saying, I feel really frustrated when you ask me a question and then walk away before I can answer it.
Also never happened in our house.
Exactly. Right. Just pulling out of thin air. But, again... I've
heard that called I statements, like instead of attacking the person.
To think about it. Yeah. Well, again, right, because it does feel like an attack when someone says, you made me do this. And then it becomes a disagreement about what the disagreement's not really about. Yeah. It's like we're arguing semantics versus trying to speak as plainly as possible and trying to talk about... Because maybe, like, one thing I've said as well sometimes is, I'm working to try and control my reaction to this, but I know I feel really... I have a triggered response when you raise your voice with me or when you yell from room to room. Like, I'm trying to focus on helping you meet your needs. And when you yell, I feel anxious, right? So instead of, you're making me so anxious right now, you're instead trying to let them know a combination of things. How what they're doing has impacted you, how you're feeling, and also that you have a goal, actually, to still meet their needs or to understand where they're coming from or whatever. And you're just letting them know that the more effective way to work through that is to just, instead of yelling from room to room, get up from what they're doing and come talk to you in the same room. Right. And so, just trying to eradicate those little inaccuracies in language, I think, can also... Because I think, like, on one hand, I am actually trying to avoid certain types of disagreements, those ones that I will call unproductive, repetitive, recurring disagreements. I, in my life, don't find those to be great learning experiences for everyone involved. And I recognize that there are actually a lot of them that are great. And I want to make space for...
Yeah, they're going to be organic disagreements that come up even if you do effectively eradicate a lot of, like, the routine ones from your life.
Yeah, right. So, okay. So before we get going, I think we already talked about some of the stuff that we had later on here. So we can probably get closer to the wrapping up phase here. I think that understanding, like if we go back to just general thoughts on our mindsets on disagreements with kids, a big takeaway for me as I think about this more intentionally is that we can kind of put our disagreements into different kind of buckets. There are disagreements that come from recurring hot button issues. There are disagreements that come from people just organically trying to help other people understand them. And there are a whole gradient of disagreements. And when we approach them not as, oh, someone disagreed with what I said, I must get angry or must try to get my way. When we approach it from that kind of growth mindset of like, this is an opportunity for growth or an opportunity to understand my kid better, we can just have a healthier attitude about them.
Yeah. And I think along the lines of seeing these things as opportunities to get to know our kids better, if our kids come to us with a request or a desire and are, like you had used the example when we were talking before the show of like, hey, I want to stay up later than usual tonight. Our instinctive gut reaction most likely is just going to be whoa, no, you know? And if we can recognize that and instead of actually react that way out loud, if we can just become curious, like we've talked a few times about the beginner's mindset, just become curious with our kid and instead say, oh, you want to stay up later than usual tonight. Why? Because I think sometimes we just assume we know everything about the situation. And so many times I've learned that there's more under the surface for our kids that I would never find out if I just shut them down. But if I ask them why, then they'll share their reasons with me. And quite often, once they share their reasons, we can collaborate on a solution that feels good to everybody. I can ask them, how do you see us being able to get this need met for you? And how can we also meet my need of not staying up super, super late also because I'm tired? You know, like once we find out the underlying reasons for these requests that we want to shut down right away, that's, you know, doing that's going to turn into a big disagreement. So if we ask questions, we find out what they really need, and then we have a lot more tools to go forward with.
Yeah, the going to bed late one, I think this is a really good example to leave things on today. In our family, we don't, like an ideal we have in our family is that we're comfortable with people choosing when they go to bed. The reality in our family today is that all of our kids have demonstrated a very strong desire for help in that process of falling asleep. And so,
right, they want us to be there with them.
Yeah, maybe, you know, watch a video with them or read a book or, you know, snuggle in with them to help them to feel comfortable. And so given that they've basically said, I have trouble going to sleep without that right now, we also will let them know, okay, here's around the time that I'm the latest that I'm willing to do
that whole process. Yeah.
And it's dependent on what's going on in the house, you know, how tired we are. Just if we have any goals for ourselves for the night, that will be very difficult to meet if we have to take a long extended break to do that. And given that that's out there and our kid comes and says, oh, I'm not going to be ready at 9 o'clock to go and lie down, instead of just, because my instinct a lot of times is, are you serious? You seem so tired right now. Like,
right.
You know, whatever. And if I can fight that instinct and go into a discussion that oftentimes has led to actually a really healthy discussion. So they disagree, right? They don't want to do it. And I can say, okay, what's going on? Well,
yeah, what do you want to do?
Oh, I'm right in the middle of this movie and I can just tell there's going to be 40 minutes left in it by the time you want to go to sleep. And that might be a night where I say, okay, no worries, and just stay up and watch it. Or they might say, oh, I'm just really, really getting into this video game right now and I really want to keep doing it, or my friend is over or whatever. And that can be a time for a conversation of, okay, well, let's talk about what it might look like for you to put yourself to bed tonight. Are you ready to try that tonight? And they might say, oh, well, no, I'm not ready to try it tonight. And then we can circle back to, oh yeah, the reason we do this in the first place is because you want it, you know? Or they might say, yeah, tonight's the night I'm ready to try it. You know, this is feeling, and then they can try and maybe it's going to succeed. Maybe it's not. But instead of going right into hard feelings or me putting my foot down or anything that, because we might just arrive to, okay, well, I'm not ready to do it tonight. I am really into this game. I plan on waking up early tomorrow and I want to start, like we've had this talk with our oldest son, I want to start that process. My life will be better when I can just put myself to bed. What are some steps we can take in the meantime?
Start practicing that.
Right. Maybe we read a book, but then we leave the room while you fall asleep.
Yeah.
And it leads to a productive discussion that will help us get all our needs met rather than, I said needs net.
I know, I was going to let it go.
That's pretty good.
Everyone knows what you mean.
Yeah. Rather than, just going back down the old rabbit hole of, well, here we are arguing about bedtime again.
Yeah, and not to mention, then everybody hopefully leaves that conversation feeling like it was productive and like they were heard, and the kids leave the conversation feeling like, oh, Dad just totally wanted to help me get what I wanted in the best way that he could. Leaves that feeling partnered with, basically.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, I'm with you. Let's do this. We are grateful that you've joined us, and thank you as always for being with us on this journey. And remember that every moment is a new chance to be the parent that you want to be.
Love you guys. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to One Free Family. If you enjoy the podcast, please show your support by becoming a patron at onefreefamily.com/support. Your support will help make this show better. Plus, you can get access to rewards and additional episodes by joining. Again, that's onefreefamily.com/support. This has been a Pax Libertas Productions podcast.